Hello and welcome to The World Now. We'll begin this hour with reports from Mali, where 2 months after deadly attacks on army bases in central Mali, more than 50 soldiers and 1 civilian have been killed in another attack, but this time in the country's north. The attack, which has been claimed by the Islamic State, is one of the deadliest against the West African country's military in years. Details in this report.
Mali has suffered sporadic violence since 2012. This is after Islamist militants took over the north of the country. The country is still reeling from deadly jihadist raids in last September that underscored the increasing reach and sophistication of armed groups operating in the region. The violence on Friday took place a month after 41 soldiers were killed and scores went missing during 2 coordinated assaults on 2 army bases in central Mali, which has slipped from government control despite the presence of the French army and other international forces. A government spokesman, Yaya Sangare, on Saturday said on Twitter that 54 bodies, including 1 civilian, were found along with 10 survivors in the latest assault. He said the attack unleashed considerable material damage, but added that the situation is under control. Not sound. Groups with Al-Qaeda and Islamic State links have been able to fan out across the Sahel, destabilizing parts of Niger and Burkina Faso from their stronghold in Mali.
An associate fellow African programs at Chatham House, Paul Melly, joins me via Skype from London to discuss these security issues in Mali. Thanks to you, Paul Melly, for joining us on this hour. What do you make of this recent attack, the second within a month, on army bases in Mali?
It highlights the extraordinarily difficult security situation in north and central Mali and the real problem that the Malian army has in trying to establish any kind of control in territories outside the big cities, outside the main towns. The moment the army tries to fan out into rural areas and away from the main towns, this means establishing relatively small bases, informal outposts in rural areas, and that leaves their soldiers very, very exposed to attack. It's a huge problem because even with the French forces and the UN forces and now the new united force of the G5 Sahel countries, northern Mali is a huge, huge area. So restoring security, deploying enough troops so that they themselves can be safe, let alone do anything useful to protect local communities, is very difficult.
You said that it leaves the army open to attack, but what other implications does it have, especially in this war against terrorism in Mali?
Well, I think a lot depends on the different part of the country that you're in. In the center of Mali, where the situation is more complex because jihadist activity has become mixed up with tensions between communities, there are some hopes that you might get progress towards restored security precisely because those local communities are involved. So you have local interests, local groups who might be able to negotiate and mediate some sort of local settlement. But when you're talking about very vulnerable areas towards the edge of the Sahara Desert in the northeast of the country or close to the Niger border, these are areas where community issues don't seem to have quite such a big role to play, and where it really is largely driven by the determination of jihadist groups to make a military impact. And because they're prepared to use completely ruthless tactics, often suicide tactics, of course, and because they're determined to intimidate the army, they're not really interested in a military victory. They're interested in capturing small garrisons, then trying to kill as many people as possible to destroy morale in the army. And that's a very difficult technique to fight back against. And the jihadists are very mobile. They have motorbikes. They move across the countryside very quickly, even with the support, for example, of French warplanes brought in from Niamey in Niger, which is very close. It's very difficult to strike at small and highly mobile groups of of fighters who are prepared to be completely ruthless.
All right, many security analysts fear that, this kind of attacks in 2 months doesn't do so well for the motivation of the army. What can the government do at this moment to ensure that the army stays motivated? All right.